Yo, what up? How we been? How we doing? Hey, listen, I know that you're rolling your eyes because you're like, listen, I don't want to set any goals. I'm going to go to school, I'm going to set goals. My parents want me to set goals. Every time around this time of year, I have to set goals. And the reality is just get over it because you're going to set goals for the rest of your life if you want to be good at life. Set goals. That's how you get better at stuff. But in order to set good goals, here's where I'm at. You have to actually start by reflecting a little bit. You have to reflect on the past. And so I had some time over break, and I was doing some reflection. And just listen, because I'm a pastor and just uber spiritual all the time, I decided to reflect on our acronym, Christ-centered difference maker. And I'm thinking the first question is just like, all right, hey, am I Christ-centered? Do I love God? And the answer is like, check. I'll sign up for another year. We're doing great. I love God. And then the second question is like, hey, love others, difference maker. And I'm quickly just thinking like, check. Of course I love others. Of course I love people. I had people over at my house over break. We had a little party, cooked some hamburgers. I cooked them terribly. They were totally raw and no one ate them. But I had them over. It was the thought that counts. I opened the door for people. Like, listen, of course I love people. But there was this guy at Fry's who was putting his groceries in his car, and he had the cart with him, and he loaded all his groceries in the car, and the cart rack was like just right over here. It was just like right there. It was just right there, and instead of putting the cart back in the cart rack, he just gets in his car and he pulls away. Like, of course I love people, but sometimes certain people are hard to love. Like, listen, of course I love people. But I was at the gym. Shocking, I know. I was at the gym. I was on a little stair climber, doing my thing, hot girl walk, and I'm climbing and someone comes next to me, which is fine. Listen, it's totally fine that you want to come stand next to me while I'm working out. Like, that's a good thing that you should do. There's lots of stair climbers. You can totally work at it. But someone showed up next to me, and it's fine. She had her headphones in. But then someone called her, and she started talking to this person, and it seemed like she was talking to the person on the taller side of the room. She was talking so incredibly loud, and I'm right next to her. I can hear her in my noise-canceling headphones. Like, listen, of course I love people. Of course I do. Of course I do. New Year's Eve. Listen, New Year's Eve, I have a bunch of little kids in my house. I got a bunch of little kids in my house, and New Year's Eve does not happen until midnight. But in my neighborhood, people started shooting off fireworks at 8 p.m., right when I'm trying to put my kids to bed. And I'm just thinking, of course, Jesus, of course I love people. But when people shoot fireworks at 8 p.m., like, I'm just not that convinced that I can love every single person. You know what I'm saying? And I think you do this too. Like, stop. Of course you do this. Jake, I love everybody. No, you don't. No, you don't. You loved your boyfriend like you got him a gift for Christmas. I, in general, love most people. But Jake, listen, there was a kid in my chemistry class. He sits right next to me. And Jake, he just chews so incredibly loud. Like, so loud, and he couldn't just bring applesauce as a snack. He's bringing pretzels and Captain Crunch, and I'm like, without the milk, what are you doing? I love people, I do. Maybe it's your little sister, I don't know, maybe your sister. You're having people over at your house, because that's what you do, you have your friends over, and you told your little sister, like, listen, little sister, I know you're gonna be home, but you need to stay upstairs. Our friends are downstairs. And she keeps coming down the stairs. And you know it's because she thinks your friend's cute, and that's weird. Like, stay upstairs, little sister. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you had to work a lot over Christmas break. Working sucks, right? And you were exhausted. It was a long day. And you're angry, you're frustrated. And you get home, and you know this feeling like, this is a bed night. We're going right to the room. We're watching the whole season of Wednesday, and we're gonna try again tomorrow. Like, that's the plan. And you get home, and your mom looks at you, and she has the audacity to be like, hey, listen. I need your help in the kitchen right now. And you're like, I love people. I love people, but sometimes loving specific people is really hard. And so here's where I'm at. I'm thinking about this all break, and I'm thinking about, hey, God calls us to love people. And I feel like a lot of us do this thing, we're like, yeah, God, I'm great at that. I love people in air quotes. And we just move on to the next thing. Of course I love people. Of course I'm good at loving people. And I think the question God has for us is not, do you love people? The question is this, like, do you love specific people? Do you love the people that suck? Do you love the people that annoy you? Do you love the people that just like get under your skin? Because I think anybody can just love people in general, but I think God calls us as Christ-centered difference makers to love the people that are hardest to love. And maybe you're thinking, Jake, I don't know if that difference is that important. Like, God can't honestly think that I can just love everybody that's hard to love. Well, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. It would be nice if you were right. There's a guy in the Bible that would probably think that you're not right. His name is John the Baptist. And listen, I don't know if you know anything about John the Baptist, but here's the scoop on John the Baptist. John the Baptist was born around the same time as Jesus was born. He was born to parents Elizabeth and Zechariah. And here's the deal, Elizabeth and Zechariah, they're like incredibly old. Like 55 probably. I'm kidding. They're super old. There's someone who's 55 that's really mad right now, just really frustrated. We found him. No, they're so old that they no longer can have a child. And they've never been able to have a child, but that doesn't stop them from praying. They're praying for a kid, they're praying for a kid, they're praying for a kid. And God finally shows up to Zechariah and says, listen, I've heard your prayers, you're gonna have a kid, his name's gonna be John. And Zechariah's like, that ain't gonna happen. And God's like, yeah, it's gonna happen, and because you doubted me, you can't talk anymore. Boom, he's mute. He can't talk at all until the baby is born. God says, I'm gonna give you a child, his name's gonna be John, but here's the deal. You have to tell, this kid is called to tell people about my son who has come in Jesus. And so John the Baptist starts working it. He starts telling people about Jesus. As he grows older, he starts preaching. And here's the thing about this time, when people preached, it was the talk of the town. If you were an adult this weekend, Ashley had a funny joke about how there was no Real Housewives of Jerusalem at this time. Like, there was nothing else for you to do. There wasn't Netflix, there wasn't Hulu, there wasn't every single show. You didn't have a phone with TikTok or Twitter. Like, when someone was talking, you would go listen to them because it was engaging, it was interactive. And so John had this crowd, and he was pointing people towards Jesus, and he was telling them to get baptized. And in one particular moment, in one particular sermon, he's preaching like normal. He says this, a voice of one calling in the desert. This is in Luke 3, but John is speaking. Prepare the way of the Lord, that's Jesus. Make straight paths for him. Every valley shall be filled in, every mountain and hill made low. The crooked road shall become straight, and the rough ways smooth, and all mankind will see God's salvation. And you're thinking like, all right, get him, John. Yeah, go. Like, I'm in. Jesus, my guy. John makes kind of a hard turn. He does this. John said to the crowds coming out to be baptized by him, he says, you brood of vipers. Which, side note, unless like you're in Verrado and you go to Verrado High, like you probably shouldn't be calling someone a brood of vipers. This is a problem. Like, like you better back this statement up. And John doesn't care. John keeps going. You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the coming wrath? Catch this, produce fruit in keeping with repentance. Produce fruit, remember that, pocket that, keep that in the back of your head. And do not begin to say to yourself, we have Abram as our father, for I tell you that out of these stones God can raise up children for Abram. Here's the deal. John's saying to these people, these Jewish people who think that they're good, they think that they have a future in the kingdom of heaven because their daddy is a Jew and their daddy's daddy's a Jew, their daddy's daddy's a Jew, and they just don't have to do anything. I'm in this lifestyle. Like, of course I'm gonna see the kingdom of heaven. And I think he's speaking to some of us too, like, hey, of course I'm good with God. I come to church every single Sunday night. Like, of course I'm good with God. Like, I'm in a neighborhood group, I read my Bible sometimes. Of course I'm good with God. I walk through a door. Like, of course. John's telling these people, listen, your past doesn't matter. Are you producing fruit? And he says this. Write this down. This is Luke. This is the reference. Just Luke 3, verse 9. It says the axe is already at the root of the trees. And every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. The axe is already at the root. And I'm thinking most of you have probably never seen anybody cut wood before. Oh, maybe you have, just now, actually. Here's what I know about cutting wood. Listen, I'm not tough at all, but growing up, my dad, we had a fireplace, and my dad would make me chop wood, and I hated every second of chopping wood, because as a kid, you hate anything your dad wants you to do. Is that kind of just like a rule of thumb? And so what I know about chopping wood, though, is a few things. What I know about chopping wood is in order to chop wood, you have to be intentional. In order to chop wood, you have to make sure it's sitting in just the right spot. It can't be tipping over. It can't be on its way down. That's dangerous. You have to line up. You have to aim at it. You have to get a good base. You have to look at it. And then you have to, it's a lot of pressure. Then you have to chop the wood. It was totally fine. No one was hurt on this campus specifically. All right, we'll try it again. You want me to try it again? All right. Hey, when you tell your friends about this, say it went really well, okay? Hey, this will make sense, actually. So the other thing I know about chopping wood, maybe I'll give up chopping wood. That didn't go great. It's intentional. But the other thing I know about chopping wood that makes a lot of sense based on the fact that it almost killed you is that it's violent. Chopping wood is violent. You can't just you can't just drop the axe and hope that the wood is gonna chop. You have to swing it with aggression, with power, with intentionality. Man, and I read this, and I think John knows what he's saying. He's saying there are a lot of you who think you're doing great, but in the reality, you're not doing that awesome. And Jesus got no problem cutting you out. And to the people listening's credit, because they didn't almost get killed by a piece of wood, they asked the question that I feel like you and I should be asking in this moment. All right, John, well, what should I do? If I don't want to get chopped out, what should I do? How do I make sure that I produce fruit? And he says this. Says first they come up to talk to him. They say this, what should I do? And John says, hey, the man who has 2 tunics should share with him who has none. And the one who has food should do the same. And I think a lot of us, we love the idea like, hey, I'll be generous with people. I think a lot of us have an opportunity this very week to be generous. Because here's the deal. I know how this works. If you haven't had school yet, tomorrow's your first day of school and you're back. And over Christmas, you got something cool. You got a new hat. You got a new shirt. You got new jeans. You got new shoes. And I'm betting the house, you're going to wear it tomorrow. First day back. And you're going to be at school, and you're going to notice someone that maybe didn't have quite as good of a Christmas as you had. You're going to notice the one kid that's got nothing new. And honestly, he's just hoping that no one notices. But you do, everybody does. Man, maybe God's not calling you to love people. Maybe God's calling you to love that specific person. The tax collectors also came to be baptized and said, teacher, what should we do? It says, don't collect any more than you are required to. Man, I think that right now there's some of you in this room. Maybe you're child number 2, child number 3. And every Saturday, your mom and dad put out a list on the counter, and it's like the things you have to get done for the weekend. You hate that sheet of paper. But you also know that your older sibling is type A, and if you don't do anything, she'll do it all anyways. And so you just sit back and you let it happen. You take advantage of her drive. You take advantage of her willingness to do the right thing, and you just sit back and say, doesn't bother me. Maybe you don't need to love people. Maybe you need to love that specific person. Some of you have been doing something right now for months that your parents asked you to stop months ago. And your mindset is kind of like this: well, listen, if they really cared, they would find out. Well, they don't know, it doesn't hurt them. And maybe you don't need to love people. Maybe you need to love your parents enough to be honest with them and be respectful of them. The soldiers, they come up last, and they said, what should we do? And they says, don't extort money and don't accuse people falsely. Man, some of you had a rough Christmas because your girlfriend broke up with you. She said that she had standards that you didn't meet, and you probably should have just been okay with that, but you were mad. I get that you were mad. So you just started saying some stuff. Started letting little whispers out. And maybe you don't need to love people. Maybe you love that person. I don't think Jesus is in the business of calling us to just be okay with loving people. I think he's calling us to love specific people. And to be fair, I think that you may be asking this like, Jake, but loving specific people is really hard. Well, yeah, and I would even double down. I actually think it's impossible. I think it's impossible to love specific people really well unless you first understand how much Jesus loves you. I think there's no way that you can be Jesus to other people before, like, without realizing how much Jesus has loved you, or just a busted up person. And until you realize the grace that he gives you, I don't think there's ever a chance that you're gonna be able to love specific people. And so here's what we're gonna do. On your sheet of paper, you have a takeaway. And for some of you, maybe tonight, this is the night, Jesus has never been real for you. And this Jesus that loves me in spite of me sounds interesting enough that I'd love to pursue that. Maybe your takeaway is just this. If that's you, maybe just write down the word Jesus. Hey, if you wanna love people well and you haven't committed to a life with Jesus, what a great day to start. Why not do it tonight? Why not talk to your coach? Why not talk to a student pastor? Why not talk to your friend? And why not you ask some questions about what it's like to be loved unconditionally, because it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible to be loved when you don't deserve to be loved. But for a lot of us, we get that, we understand that. And our takeaway isn't that. Our takeaway is a name or multiple names. I want you to write down the names of the people who right now are the hardest specific people for you to love. Who is it? Is it your mom? Is it your dad? Is it your brother? Is it that kid in your class? Is it the kid that's like 2 rows and 3 over? Man, if 2023 was a year that everybody in this room and in rooms all across the campus, in Chandler and East Valley, and Anthem and North Phoenix, if tonight, and this was a year that students decided to not just love people, but to love specific people, to be like Jesus to specific people that are really hard to love, I can't imagine Jesus not going crazy famous this year. That's what's at stake. Students, let's be Christ-centered. Let's be difference makers. Let's produce some fruit this year. Let me pray for y'all. Heavenly Father, thank you so much that no one died when I hit that piece of wood earlier. Appreciate that, for protecting us in this moment. Man, God, it's so incredibly humbling for me to think that I'm doing a pretty good job pursuing you. And then just realizing how quickly I get frustrated with the people that you created. And forgive me for that. Help me to be someone who loves not just people, but specific people. Man, God, make this year an incredible year. We love you. In your name, amen.